Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another video. So today we're looking at the newest issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft. This is issue 211 and this is the Alpine Village. So this is quite a nice little set of free gifts with this particular magazine. So this is great if you are looking to make your Christmas cards. So it comes included with 4 8x8 printed sort of patterned paper, and then you've got these two sort of plainer papers. They are really good quality as well. You've also got a cut and embossing folder with the snowflakes and then the branches, and then you've got the Paper Discovery sort of Alpine Village stamps, and included in that you've got different kinds of houses, Christmas trees and a few sentiments. There is also a Happy New Home in there as well, which I think is great. So it's not specific for Christmas, perhaps if someone's moved house, it would be ideal for that as well. So let's take a little look within the magazine. So it does tell you in here that there are printable elements from their website. So there's, I believe it was 24 patterned papers you can download, and then some templates as well. So we are going to have a go at download those and try them out later on in the month. So be forced to subscribe so you don't miss out on those videos. So again, just looking at the inspiration inside, I can see that they have used bits and pieces from the Creative Stamping and Die Cutting Essentials magazines as well. So perhaps we might have a look at sort of pulling all of these different kinds of Christmas products together and making sort of, a collaboration card. But there's loads of inspiration in here, lots of different type of cards. So you could just stamp these images onto coloured card and then use embossing powder to heat emboss that design on there. Or you could, like we're going to do today, is just stamp on some white cardstock and then just colour them in using lots of different mediums you could use. Today we're going to use our alcohol markers. They're also showing you different ways of using this particular product with other products in, from like the Craft Stash website, just various different products that you could use to create your cards and create something really quite interesting. So let's take a look at what's going to come included in the next month's issue. So now we're going to sort of move probably past Christmas, and you've got this 26-in-1 bumper, stamp and die set, and this is going to coordinate really nicely with the Die Cutting Essentials magazine. So the first thing I wanted to show you before we get into making our card is cutting this cut and emboss folder. So what this does is it has a cut element in here, so it has like a die, if you like, within this embossing folder, which will cut through. So what you're going to be able to do is separate these two pieces, or you can keep it together. So you can see that you have the embossed sort of snowflakes, and then you've got those branches. So it will stay connected once you've run it through your die cutting machine. So you could use it as a whole piece, or you could separate this out just by snipping it apart. So for today's card, we are going to be using the branches. So we're going to use the top section of this, and it's just going to sort of finish off our card nicely, sort of along the bottom and along the top, just to help kind of frame it a little bit. But for now, let's get into creating our card for today. So I'm going to create a slimline card. So I cut and created my slimline base, and that is 3.5 by 8.5 inch. And I've cut myself a piece of cardstock that I'm going to be stamping onto. That is, I believe, about 1/2 inch smaller. I was planning to mat and layer this, that's why I did it that particular size, but I decided not to in the end because I really liked how it looked just with the sort of scene that we create, and then that thicker white border around it. What we're going to do is create 3 sort of sections using these stamps. We're going to create a little village scene as if they are sort of on different hills, wherever this might be. So we're just going to kind of build that up. So you can see that I've stamped this sort of church image, and I'm going to stamp some trees just alongside it. So I started off by cutting the cardstock to the right size, so I knew that was going to be right. I didn't have to cut it down, and I wasn't going to stamp any more sort of than what I really needed. I'm just going to stamp these images next to each other, so I didn't find any need to do any masking off of the images, nothing like that. I was happy, some of them just sort of overlapped a little bit, but to be honest, you didn't really notice, so I wasn't too worried about it. So you can see I've left a good sort of inch and a half at the bottom of this cardstock, and this is then going to allow me to sort of layer up these sort of little scenes that we're going to build, and it means then you won't see anything that is behind it. So I decided to actually cut this out before I coloured it or anything like that, because I didn't want to go through the effort of colouring and then potentially not be able to sort of use that section. And the other reason why I'm cutting this out first is so I can use this as a template for where I want to stamp my next images. So you can see how this is going to kind of look. We're going to sort of build it up our slimline card. That's what I really love about these slimline sizes, is that you can kind of go up. You don't necessarily have to go across in landscape. It just gives you sort of a little bit of variety. So before I stamp my next layer, you can see that I'm just bringing back that first set of trees and that church, and then I'm going to use that to help sort of position the next sort of layer. I don't want too much that's going to be sort of hiding behind. If you've got the trees, you've got a lot of different heights within the scene that we're building, so we want to make sure that you can sort of see everything. I don't end up using this particular layout. I end up with this first one that I stamped that ends up actually at the back, because you'll see I do end up putting my finger in my ink pad and I get a little bit of ink at the bottom, so I decided just to mix them around a little bit. But you can see I've used the same house twice, and I've got this 3 set of sort of Christmas trees or pine trees, whatever they might be, and it was actually a set of 3, but you can see I've only stamped 2 there. The reason why I did this was because, again, I didn't want to have to go through the effort of masking this, but all I did was inked up the stamp completely and then just used my microfiber cloth and just wiped off one of the trees, made sure it was clean so it didn't sort of give an impression on my cardstock at all, which it didn't, so just clean it off, and then it just stamped those 2 images. For the second one that I did, I also then just inked up the stamp by taking the stamp to the ink pad and just stamping it right on the edge. That means then that, again, you're not going to get any ink. You can sort of see where you're inking it up. So now we're going to do the last layer. So you can see I just fussy cut around that middle layer as well. I've just left a nice little white border. I want this to be kind of a snow scene, so I'm not too worried about too much sort of white cardstock. But for each layer I did want to get sort of different kinds of trees. I wanted to get different kinds of the houses in there as well, so I really love that they've got sort of a really nice variety of different kind of places. So maybe if you're making a new home card, you know, maybe one of these kinds of houses might represent if someone's moved to the country and like a little cottage, then it will work sort of perfectly for that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and fussy cut the last sort of layer. So again, this one actually ends up being the foreground piece, so you can see that I didn't leave as much of a white gap at the bottom of this section, so I could have done with having sort of that bigger sort of gap, but you can see here I put my finger in the ink pad and it sort of went all across the bottom, so it did kind of muck it up a little bit. So that was how I originally wanted it to look, and then I end up just swapping it round just to help sort of cover some of those sort of finger marks. So, you know, if ever this happens, you don't want to sort of throw things away. You know, if you've gone through the effort of stamping things, it's just work out a way. Maybe you can cover it with an embellishment. You can do something just to sort of help hide those little mistakes. So I am going to be skipping past the colouring today. I'm really not doing anything too kind of detailed at all, and it turns out it wasn't quite in focus because I did sort of zoom in a little bit. But again, so nothing, I didn't do any shading. I used a couple of different colours in here, but you can see I thought the images were quite small, so I didn't want to kind of waste too much time trying to get sort of too much detail in there. The next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to just give the snow a little bit of sparkle, that white area, just to give it the impression that it was snow, not just kind of blank areas. So I just took one of these Spectrum Noir shimmer pens. This is just a clear liquid that has got sort of glitter in it, iridescent in there, and it is just going to kind of shine nicely. Again, just to give it that sort of snow glistening. So I'm actually going to go back to a previous issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft to pick up some of their patterned paper. So I didn't want to use the paper that came included in this one today because it was a lot thicker and it seemed like a really great cardstock. It's single-sided as well, so I want to save that for a different kind of project. So I was happy to use quite a neutral patterned paper, and it does, you know, just mean that you can sort of mix products and papers from all your different magazines, and it'll just work just as well together. So I cut that down, that back and piece down as well, and I'm actually going to be trimming it because it's sort of just slightly too big. I'm going to trim that side down as well so it all sort of matches and becomes the same size. And then I'm just going to use some double-sided tape to pop down these sort of alpine layers. So I'm just layering my bottom one first because I want to make sure that I'm not going to have to cut this card any shorter. I want that to be in the right position. And then I'm just going to go ahead, when I know where I'm going, then I can take off the back into the double-sided tape and then I can stick this down. So you can see that we have got a few more gaps just because I ended up flipping over those layers. So I did it the opposite way around. But I think they still fitted in quite nicely. I didn't end up putting any adhesive or anything on, the tops of the trees or the houses. So I'm just going in with a tape runner. I'm just going to tape those bits down. It's just a little less messier than using glue or anything like that. I do it afterwards as well, just to make sure that everything's all stuck down. So next thing I'm going to do is use the top part of that embossing folder. These are the branches. I'm going to come in here with a distress ink. So this is that bundled sage. Just using a blending tool here just to put a really light layer of ink on top. I'm not really sort of worried about getting too much of detail in here, about not getting ink in certain places. I'm really just kind of putting this over the top. And like I said previously, I think this is great to create little frames, and I think that's kind of the design, to kind of frame your card, make it look like you're sort of looking through the trees, like an Alpine Village. So this is a really great addition. One thing I do want to show you quick is just how I've started storing my blending sponges. So you can see I've just put that on the underside and used a piece of washi tape just to hold that in place. I was finding that I was putting it into a like a Tupperware container, and I felt then the colour was sort of transferring from one sponge to the next. So I really wanted to try and keep them separate. So I know some people sort of use Velcro dots sort of on the underside of their ink pads, but I decided just to use some washi tape because I haven't got any of those at the moment. So next thing I'm going to do is I've cut down the branches, and I've just done a small corner. I didn't want to do it across the whole of the bottom, but I wanted to just put a small piece in the corner, and that would then hide as well just that little bit of ink that I had sort of smudged. But I'm going to use it all the way across the top. That's going to help sort of fill in that gap at the top as well. But I really loved just that hint of it at the bottom. So I'm going to put that right up against the corner so we can get a nice sort of bit of variety of lengths and things on the branches as well. And again, that's just going to help sort of finish those gaps a little bit. So like I said at the start, I was planning to just matte and layer this. That's why I cut it to the size that I did. But when I popped it on the card, I just wanted to see how it'd look. And I actually really loved having it with the thicker white border around the outside. So I do always matte and layer, but I just decided this time that I didn't want to. So I'm just going to use some double-sided tape just to adhere down our panel onto our card base. And again, it just becomes a really sort of more simple card, I think, because there doesn't look like there's too much going on. So you have got a few different elements within this card, but again, just without that matte and layering, and I feel like that thicker border just makes it look a little bit more simple. So I'm going to pop a sentiment on. So I took, again, one of those papers from the previous issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft, and this background, the colour matches the background of our card that we've got, but it was the ones that had all the little houses, and I felt like the houses really went brilliantly with the stamps within this set. So if you did have that previous issue, I will link to a video where we looked at that magazine, but I feel like those images that were on those papers work really, really well with these stamped images that they've got in here. So I think it's great to be able to sort of mix those products together. So the last thing I did was just stamp that sentiment from our house to yours onto that colour patterned paper, and then die cut it with a circle die cut, and then just pop that onto some foam pads just in the corner. I didn't want to have it sort of flat on the image. I wanted to have something just a little bit different, a little bit of a different element. So that's it for this card. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you like this card and the video, then please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so you don't miss out on any future videos. So I do feel like with this particular magazine and these free gifts, there's quite a lot of things they've included. So hopefully we'll get some really good videos out this month. So that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.